So once I get done with a coaching call from somebody within the Ditch Hygiene Academy community, I like to take and sit with it for a few minutes. And I always like to take basically three takeaways. What were the biggest things that we talked about, and how can I use that information to create content, educate others, make building a profitable myofunctional therapy practice possible for other humans like you. You're here watching this. So I just got done with a coaching session, and I wrote down three takeaways that I think will be really helpful for you. So the first one, we talked about SEO, which, if you are new to the world of business, SEO is search engine optimization. So that's really, just because you build a website, doesn't mean that people are it's not filled of dreams. People aren't just going to automatically show up because you have a website. You have to be using search engine optimization. Okay. And so she wanted to know my recommendations on this. Many of my students in the past have embarked on building their own website, which I think is to be celebrated, and it's super exciting. My backstory with my website is I knew nothing about building a website. Many of you guys think that just because I had a master's in business that I knew how to build a website. No, master's in business, at least in my program, did not teach anything that was technical like that. It was, the boring things like a marketing plan, which nobody uses these days, or nobody uses an antiquated marketing plan. Accounting, I don't do accounting. I have software that does that, so I didn't know how to build a website. So a lot of people have their opinions about WordPress. I loved building my website with WordPress. My recommendation as far as when you build your website for your business, first of all, let me just say, you can build a very successful business without having a website. So I never want that to be the thing that holds my students back from raising their hand and saying, hey, I can help you. I think the most important thing is that you have your Myo knowledge, so you know obviously what you're doing. You have your skill, you know who your audience is, and you know what your offer is, okay? You know what you're selling. Those things you can make easily 6 figures just by being able to tell people you can help them. But when it comes to your website, you can build it out slowly, but the reason I loved building the WordPress site is it was very easy for me. I hosted it with Bluehost. I've always been with them. I've had no issues. And I used a template called Divi, D-I-V-I, and it is so very easy. I can make changes all the time. And that is what I think is so important about building your own website is you can go on the back end and you can fix things. If you find a typo, you don't have to ask your website builder to fix it. If you want to change your verbiage or your prices or update something. So I think that's really helpful. But when it comes to my recommendation for a website, I think you need to have a website that you can build to be a tool for you. Okay. So many students like to start with something that's free. And I get that because they don't want to spend the money. But I want you to build for the business that you want to have 5 years from now. Everything in my business is automated, okay? I don't send links to anybody. Those are automated emails that when somebody books an exam, they go get sent right to the web page that has their instructions. So that's what I mean about building a website that's a tool for you. So when you use cheap or free services, oftentimes you can't build them out and customize them the way you want. You can download forms on my website. You can book your appointments from my website, all of those things. So that's my biggest recommendation. Also, as you build out your website, really make sure that you are using SEO, making sure that you're using SEO-rich words, okay? Very early on in your business, I think having a blog is very helpful because then you have all these very keyword-rich paragraphs, if you will, that are on your website. So that's really helpful. So I don't think there's a certain number of pages. Obviously, there's legal requirements that you have to have on your website, like your privacy policy, that kind of stuff. But as far as just the pages and how you're building it, my recommendation is spread your wings a little bit. You can do it. You can build your own website, but just make sure that if you're doing something that's cheap or free, that it has the ability for you to grow it into the tool that you want. Because I have, unfortunately, I have seen a lot of students who had to go back and start over because they didn't technically have something that they could add on to, if you will. Okay, so that is takeaway from that coaching number 1. Takeaway number 2, or the second big topic was how do I know when I'm on track of where I want to be in my business? Again, there's no right or wrong for this. What this really boils down to is you choosing what your essential priorities are. So one thing in the program and basically in any time management that I teach is not having more than 3 essential priorities. And that is basically for any quarter or any 12-week period, okay? And the reason let me back up. So how you come to those for some people is they take their annual goals and they just kind of distill those down. Annually, down into quarterly, down into monthly, down into weekly, down into daily. And that's really how I do mine too. I focus more on 12 weeks. It's called the 12-week year. And that is just because what happens sometimes when people focus on annual goals is, say it's March and that just seems so far away. There's no urgency. Well, then all of a sudden you're in October and you're $60,000 short. It's hard to really put your foot on the gas and come up with all of that money that you're looking to earn, okay? The reason I like to focus on the 12-week year is because my foot is on the gas pedal all of the time. Unless I'm purposefully choosing not to have it on there, I'm constantly like, here's what I want to earn in this 12-week period, okay? I want to earn $75,000. I want to earn $100,000 in this period. That is, that for me personally, that pushes me so much more. I'm so much more focused when I'm working with a smaller chunk of time. But again, it's kind of the same thing. My financial goals of what I want to produce in every 12 weeks or every quarter, it kind of builds out to my annual goals. Okay, so to answer the question, how do I know when I'm on track? The biggest thing is just sticking with those essential priorities. So once you distill it down, like, okay, for myself, my example would be, if I want to earn $75,000 revenue in this quarter, what do I need to be doing? I need to be booking X amount of exams. I need to be booking, doing X amount of this. If I know that I need to book 10 exams to sell 5 customers, then you can do the math. If you want to earn this much money, I call it Myo math. If you want to earn this much money and you need this many clients to do that, and you have to book 2 exams for every 1 exam to say yes, then that tells you, okay, I need to do 50 exams. Okay, so then your priority becomes, where are those people? Where do I find those people? How do I get those exams? That becomes your priority. Okay, so I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to know if you're on the right track. If you're procrastinating, like, you're gonna know if you're not doing what you say you need to be doing. Okay, I can look right on my software that I use for my 12-week year. I can look right on it and say, oh, I'm not doing that. Or I can give myself a grade. I'm doing about 40% of that, okay? And there are sometimes, you guys, so I don't want you to have more than 3, or I don't recommend that you have more than 3 essential priorities. There are many times that I have 1 priority. And I learned this from one of my mentors, Alex Hormozy, when he was like, hey, if you have all these priorities, what is the biggest priority? Everything else now is not a priority, because if you have number one priority, you don't need to be spending your time on doing number 2 priority when you have number 1 priority. So there are many times in my practice where I might have a week where I am just solely focused on priority number one. I'm not doing 2 hours on priority one, 2 hours on priority two, 2 hours on priority three. So again, you get to decide what works best for you. Okay, and the last thing that I want to touch on from this coaching session is when I onboard a new coaching client, on the first coaching call, we talk about, I call it things that I'm going to hold against them, like where their strengths are, where they already have business knowledge, where they need support, that kind of stuff. But also what I hold against them is when they tell me, hey, here's my strengths and here's how I get in my own way. Here's habits that are holding me back, because those are the things that rear their ugly head over and over again. So in this industry, typically, because mostly who I coach is dental hygienists, there's 3 Ps. It's the 3 Ps that kill, okay? People pleasing, also known as lack of boundaries, perfectionism, and procrastination. And so these really are sneaky. And I think for dental hygienists, because a lot of us tend to be type A plus personalities, we want everything to be perfect. So if I can offer something to you today, it is to get comfortable with B plus work, and also to really start to live into the concept of done is better than perfect. Inside my products, inside my coaching, I teach all about the decide and do process. And that's really once you make decisions. I talk a lot about making data-driven decisions, and it takes time to get data, so I encourage my students to make a decision, whatever it is. When I talk about knowing who your who is, okay, so say you want to work with children and you're not getting any business working with children, so suddenly you now think maybe you want to work with people who have jaw pain. Like, we don't want to go back and just continually reinvent the wheel or remake decisions. No, you want to make a decision and stick with it long enough to have data, which is very often, 6 months at least. But you want to make a decision, take ugly and perfect action, evaluate what's working, what's not working, what do I want to do differently, and then you go back to more ugly and perfect action. You don't burn everything else down. You don't suddenly make a different offer. You don't suddenly lower your prices, because so many of you guys, that's the first thing you want to do when you feel like something's not growing as much as you want it to. You want to lower your prices, which just devalues your services and makes you into more of a commodity like corn or wheat, and then you're just there, the lowest to the lowest bidder, which you don't want. So you don't want the 3 Ps to kill you, okay? Procrastination is just fear. It's just high level fear. It's just wearing a fancier outfit. Identify it. If you are just continually researching, you're buffering, you're procrastinating, okay? And oftentimes my students will say, well, I don't really procrastinate unless I'm trying to get something perfect, and then I tend to procrastinate. So if you can embrace B plus work, or done is better than perfect, I think that's going to help you get a lot further when it comes to those essential priorities. And the whole people pleasing thing, saying yes to everything, there's an opportunity cost for everything. And if you're somebody who's taking my content in, or maybe you're studying with me, maybe you're one of my students, and you want this certain thing, then you have to set some boundaries. So every single life gets in the way excuse, well, most of them are all just failure to set boundaries. So those are my thoughts on that. So I hope that something from this is helpful for you. Quite a little variety from that coaching, but I like to just kind of pull these pieces out, these little nuggets that I think might be helpful for other people who are also on the journey of building their profitable myofunctional therapy practice.